Hey everybody, welcome back to Adventure Stories. This is the official podcast of Adventure Christian Church, where we have the opportunity to just hear the stories that come along with the lives of people in our church, right? Life is an adventure, so we get to hear adventure stories of people in our church and around our church and in the community, and people that are just doing cool things right now, where their lives have had the opportunity to collide and bump into Jesus and just how that's changed everything. And so today we're going to hop into part 2 of a conversation we started last week with Bridget Morgan. Bridget is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she and her husband Justin and their daughter Cora joined our church late last year in December. And last week's conversation really focused in on how to thrive, not just survive, in this coronavirus quarantine world for those of us with younger kids. Now today we're going to shift gears a little bit, and Bridget's going to focus in on those of us that maybe we don't have family or we're not living with family, or we don't have kids. And so that what that means for us is that we're riding out this coronavirus quarantine deal alone. So how do we thrive in this without falling into the trap of isolation? She's also going to talk about those of us that maybe have older kids who now are having to deal with some pretty substantial disappointment when it comes to, these, I'm not going to have a graduation, I'm not going to have prom, or even graduating from college. Like, these are these things that people talk about or they remember for the rest of their lives. And now those spaces in some of our kids' lives are going to look completely different. And then the last thing that she's going to talk about today is kind of navigating this tension that exists between us and extended family. So how do we have the conversation with, grandparents and extended family about this is kind of what we need to do to make sure that we keep each other safe during this time. And so I hope you enjoy part 2 of our conversation today. So let's get rolling. Makes everything better. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit because I know some of us, in the church, like we've got kids at home, and all of a sudden now we are parent and all that kind of stuff. But some of us don't. Some of us are single, right? Some of us, maybe our kids are grown up and they've moved out. But for us right now, there are people that are solo that where they're used to going from an apartment or house or wherever to work. And working with people all day, friends, coworkers, then coming home or going out with friends on the weekend. That's not happening. It's their home by themselves. Maybe they've got a pet or whatever, but it's like, really, there's not a whole lot of interaction in that case. And so, like, what advice would you give someone who's living that way? Because, and there's a part of me, I listened to a podcast over the weekend that said, and I know the term social distancing is the term, but there's even part of me that goes, it's not that we want to be socially distant, we want to be physically distant. So There's a part of me that goes, man, I wish they would have called it physical distancing and social distancing.
Yeah.
Social distancing makes it feel like, I can't talk with anybody. I need to be isolated. So for those of us who are living alone, who are solo, who are single, like how can we manage isolation? Because that is real, and we say over and over again, social distancing doesn't mean isolation, but then there's a part of us that goes, what do you want me to do? I am isolated.
Yeah. I'm actually working with a couple of adults right now, and this is exactly what they're facing because they're home and they're alone. They're not going to work. Everything is online. And so this has been a big part of what we've been talking about. The first thing that I encourage people who are living alone to do is set up a routine and schedule for yourself. It's not just for kids. Make sure you're getting up, you're getting dressed, you have a list of things that you're going to do during the day to be proactive, because it is super tempting to lay on your couch all day and watch everything that has ever been put on Disney Plus. It's just really easy to want to do that and not be productive. But you'll slip into feeling a little bit of a depression if you continue on that path. And so we're figuring out ways that you can still be connected is another big part. again, we're better together. And so we have to be proactive in how we are reaching out to people in our lives. So reaching out to friends, FaceTiming, Zoom meetings, we're figuring out how we can maintain connected to the people that we work with. I know a lot of people are still having meetings at home and things like that, but a lot of things have kind of morphed into email form. And so that's not as community building as a Zoom meeting might be. But figuring out ways that you can actively participate in people's lives. I love what you said, that this should be called physical distancing and not social distancing, because if we maintain social distance, and if we're not reaching out to people, it will be isolating and it feels really, really bad. And we don't know how much longer this is going to last. So to make sure that every single day we're trying to have a contact with someone outside of our home, whether that be a parent or a friend, figuring out how you can get together with friends online. It's really, that's imperative to maintaining good mental health. And again, if you were in counseling of some sort, see if you can figure out if that counselor, if you feel like you need it, will have some type of telehealth thing for you, so that you can also have someone that's trained to be able to speak into you during this season.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit too about the telehealth thing. I mean, like, I know that I've done that. I mean, I've done that before with a doctor where like you FaceTime and all, a doctor shows up and like you have to show them your throat, which is always really weird. You know, it's like that. I feel this is strange. But as far as that goes, with in terms of mental health and meeting with a counselor, meeting with a therapist, how is that? I mean, how has that been going? How do you feel like that? And I know obviously it's not the ideal solution. Ideally, it would be meeting face to face. But how does that? How do you, on one side, on the therapist side of it, how do you feel about that? Because I know some people are kind of skeptical of this. I don't know if this really is going to work because they're not there and I can't, like, what's the, any tips or that when it comes to telehealth?
It's been an interesting transition, because most counselors, we didn't use telehealth before this. And so this has been an adjustment for a lot of us. But at the practice that I work at, everybody's offering telehealth services. So it kind of looks like this. We use something called Simple Practice, and it's all HIPAA compliant, and it's all protected. And so what happens is I pop up on a video screen and I see you on your video screen wherever you're at, and we have our normal session. It's interesting because most people, when they do it the first time, they're super anxious about it because they think, oh no, this person's seeing inside my world, like in my house. But it's been really nice because you can see people and their pets, and they'll have a cat come sit in their lap and they can talk to you while they're petting their cat or their dog. And it actually is more comfortable than what a lot of people initially anticipate. Telehealth can happen with little kids too. It's a little bit more challenging to do a play therapy session with a little kid. But I think for older kids and into adults, it can be a really nice thing to add weekly or biweekly, so that you still feel connected and you have someone speaking truth into you every week. So it's been an adjustment. I won't lie about that, but it's not as weird as what you think it is, because it's not like you're sitting in front of them again. I just can't give them a hug at the end of the session.
Right. Yeah. And I know that's whenever I meet with my counselor, that's always the thing I need.
Yeah.
Let's hug this out. So I get and I get the isolation, thing of, there's only so many times you can watch Tiger King. And at some point you're going to have to put on pants that don't have an elastic waist.
True.
I put my jeans on once a week just to see if they still fit. Really,
sure.
That's and I can't take credit for the physical distancing thing. That's a guy named Dave Runyon who wrote the book, The Art of Neighboring. He did that. So credit to Dave Runyon. And I get that encouragement of get on a schedule, take a shower. Those, because again, when this whole thing started, there was a part of this book, I don't have to take a shower and I can wear shorts all day. This is great. Like, I shave my head. I don't have to wash my hair. I don't have that. There's no reason for
right.
These normal things, like just embrace the new landscape, but kind of like you were saying, still embracing those normal things, having that having that schedule, that routine, and doing some of those things and reaching out, being proactive in those things really does make a huge difference. And
I've been changing your clothes is a big thing.
yeah,
Even if you're taking off your nighttime yoga pants and you're putting on your daytime yoga pants, it's still, there's something that happens that makes you more, I don't know, productive whenever you change. And so sometimes we want to stay in jammies all day, which sometimes is fun. But if it's a work day, to try to at least get prepared, like if you're going to have a work day.
yeah. And how did you know I had nighttime and daytime yoga pants? So next question is, help us when it comes to navigating like the dynamics of larger like family interactions, like, our kids not being able to see their grandparents or vice versa. I know that's something that we're walking through in our house. And when we do go see our when they are able to see their grandparents, it's like elbow bumps and things like, hey, you can't crawl up in their lap like you're used to doing. Like, you need to give them a little bit of distance and those kinds of things. So how do we navigate that? Because, there are those times that you hear well, when are we going to see our grandkids again? Or are we ever going to? And it's like, well, yeah, you will, but we got to figure out how to navigate this thing, of being able to have those conversations, of setting good boundaries, obviously, for keeping people in our lives, especially, people who are older and more in the at-risk categories. Hey, we got to keep you safe. We're not doing this because we don't love you.
Yeah.
Right? We're not doing this because we're trying to keep you from seeing your grandkids.
Right.
We're doing this to keep you safe. But then also having to be able to explain that to kids and things like that. So I know that's something that affects a lot of us, not just those of us with kids, but really everybody. How do we figure out the dynamic of family interaction in this?
Yeah, this is really hard, actually. This is very sad. We, today, Justin's dad had to come to Louisville for a doctor's appointment. And typically we would, see them, we would go out to eat with them, we would do our normal thing because they don't live in Louisville. But it was really sad because they drove up in a truck, we stood on a sidewalk, and we waved and we shouted to them. And then that was it, And so I understand that this feels really weird to grandparents, parents, and kids. Our biggest challenge as parents when we're addressing something like this is to try to remain upbeat and positive about this to our kids and to the grandparents. It's very important. We can say things like, we get to be healthy at home, and we have the privilege of keeping the people that we love safe and healthy. And we do that by being a little distant during this time. And I would constantly, our daughter's question is always, when is this going to end? When is this going to end? It will end. Do we know when? No. Is it sooner rather than later? Probably, eventually. It's not going to be months and months and months down the road. But for this short period of time, this is what we're doing so that we get to help keep our people that we love safe. And so for us as parents to not feed into kind of that worry and anxiety, try to maintain FaceTime calls, draw pictures, put them in the mail, figuring out ways that you can help grandparents still feel connected to their grandkids. We have on our iPhones, we have photo stream. And so we are constantly every day uploading pictures for grandparents to see of, this is what we did today, or just so that they feel like they have a little bit more contact than they would. So we're uploading pictures, we're sending anything that Cora has drawn for them, and then we're trying to make sure that we have that phone and FaceTime contact. But for parents, we just have to remain positive and upbeat, because this is a really hard time for everyone involved.
Sure. Yeah. And I know that that's one of those areas where you get, some grandparents and like, hey, we don't get this. We don't understand this. Then you've got kids that are going, we don't get this. And then you find yourself caught in the middle.
Yeah.
Like you got to chill out and you got to chill out. Let's figure this whole thing out. Yeah. I know that's something that we've had to navigate too, of, we can do this, but when we do this, here's like it is. It's like, we've got to drive through and wave from the driveway, like those kinds of things, or we see each other on FaceTime, and that's about it. So those things I know are tricky. And just a shameless plug too right now. I know that Kelly Miracle, who works on staff at Adventure, she works her other job, her other full-time job, right, is she works for Atria, which is a retirement community, assisted living community. And they've got communities all over the U.S. And I know that she was sharing with me about even that they have things like, and I think Sarah Gatewood even posted it on our Facebook today, that they're doing like a pen pal thing right now where
Oh yeah.
kids and families can write to people in these facilities where it's shut down. Like Easter, I tried to take flowers to my grandmother who's in an assisted living community, and it's like you got to drop it at the front door and hazmat yourself out, like they spray you out on your way in and your way out, which I understand that. But there are things that we can do, not just for our grandparents, but for, and people in our lives like that, but even for people that maybe don't have people in town or don't have people that are connecting with them. There are good opportunities. And
I love the pen pal idea.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. That's a wonderful thing that parents, especially, well, for Jack and Cora, they're learning how to write and spell, and so that would actually be probably a really good activity for them.
The last big question that I've got is, we've got, some of us have older kids, high school kids, college age. We don't know what this is going to look like, but they're facing down the reality of, hey, this what you're typically see, or what you typically are used to experiencing in these, congratulatory milestone rite of passage moments, those are probably not going to happen. So right. Those of us with kids that are older, who are facing some of those milestone moments, and it's not going to happen the way we thought it would. How do we help them deal with that? Yeah,
this one weighs heavy on me. And I don't have all the answers for this. And I thought a lot about this actually. And I pulled some ideas when I've worked with older high schoolers and college students on dealing with disappointment. And so I'm trying to figure out how we can marry that model into kind of what students are experiencing. And of course, we don't have a lot of answers. School hasn't been canceled through the end of the year. A lot of things have been disrupted. A couple of the thoughts that I've had are not to minimize the students' feelings. These are really big things that are causing a great deal of sadness and disappointment for them. So really trying not to minimize how they're feeling. I would avoid saying things like, we shouldn't feel that way, or something like that. Just really listen and validate. Encourage the student to share their feelings with you. So being open. And if you tell the student that you would love to hear how they're feeling, be prepared to sit there and listen to it. Don't have to get up and leave, or whatever the case may be. Sit there and be available for them to talk to. Listen, do not judge, and really you shouldn't be offering too many solutions at this time. My thought on it is, sometimes when people are talking, whenever they come to counseling, or whenever somebody is talking about something that makes them feel really frustrated, a lot of times they just want to get it out in the universe. They just want to talk about it. And they're not necessarily looking for your solutions. They just want to get it off their chest. You could ask them, do you want to brainstorm how we can handle this? Or do you just want me to listen? And so put that out there for the student, because oftentimes they just want to share how they're feeling, and they don't need anything else, just the listening ear. So listen, do not judge, do not offer solutions, and then empathize with them. Because what they're experiencing is really sad and disappointing. Another thing that typically what I'll go into when I'm working with older students is talking about what you can control versus what you can't control. And like, we literally make lists. These are the things that you can control in your life right now. These are the things that you have no control in your life. Is your list of the things that you can't control what you are focusing the majority of your time and attention on? Are you worrying more about those things, or are you putting more effort into the things that you can control? Right now, they don't have a lot of control over the things that they're concerned about. So being able to let go of some of that and put all of your attention and your all of your attention into the things that you can control. So figuring that out with the student, I understand that they're upset about prom and about graduation and about all of these things that they may not be able to experience. But we have to choose not to worry so much about those things. But it's okay to feel sad. It's like a mourning process.
Sure.
It's all of these things that you expected to happen that you kind of waited, not your whole life, but a large part of your life thinking about, and now they're not going to happen. So I understand that they are very disappointed. But we also have to figure out ways that we can keep our students connected. They are at this point still doing school online. They should be. So they're connected with teachers and students, but just to make sure that they also have friends to talk to, that if they need mental health support, that they have a counselor available that they could talk to about some of this stuff, because they might not. And I would really try not to take this part too personally as a parent, but sometimes they might need someone on the outside to talk to about all the things that they're experiencing. They love their parents very much, but sometimes they just need someone else to talk to it too.
I've got one more question, and I'm gonna throw you. This is a curveball. We didn't talk about this one, so
No.
I'm sorry. But the only reason I'm asking is that I think in this whole quarantine thing, there's one group of people that I know they don't we don't talk about them much. And it's even something that, and the only reason I say this is because recently I've had to address two situations like this, where, one specifically was someone who was quarantined alone, and really wrestled with an addiction, specifically a porn addiction on their phone. It's like, hey, I'm alone. My accountability is out the window at this point, but quarantined in a really dangerous situation for them, and a tough situation for them. But then also dealt with another situation of someone who was quarantined in an abusive situation. And so those are scary situations, and we don't think about it. That's one aspect of quarantine, I think, by and large, is getting overlooked. That we're thinking about the inconveniences of, oh, I got to teach my kids, or I can't go to the grocery, or those. But there are some people who are quarantined in some really, really tight, tough, rough situations. And I don't know that and there's a chance, obviously, that someone in a situation like that might listen to this. And so, what would we say, or what would you say to someone who's in a situation like that? And I don't know if, you could say, I don't know that I'm really allowed to say this right now, because I know we're all mandatory reporters, and I am too. So, but if someone were listening to this and they were in a situation with, someone who is physically, verbally, emotionally abusive, or they're in a situation where, hey, this isolation thing is also paired with an addiction thing, and typically those things don't work well together, right? When I get lonely or I'm isolated, this is where I go. It could be substance or whatever. What would you say from a therapist perspective to people in those situations?
I kind of see it in two categories, just based on what you're talking about. So if the first one that we're talking about is an addiction, so whether it be porn or, alcohol or drugs or whatever the case is, there are support groups that are meeting online for these things. AA, Al-Anon, all those things have moved to an online format, so you can get the help that you need. For porn addiction, there are groups online, and if somebody needs those resources, I am happy to provide that for them. But to have that accountability is major for this population of people. So figuring out a way that you can get connected with people that are going to hold you accountable. That's a big thing. Make sure that you are held accountable for those things. So again, going back to getting a community. Do not remain isolated living in this. It feels really bad. And so figuring out a way that we can get you connected with a group of people that are going to care for you. Like, they absolutely will care for you. So figuring that out is imperative. The second group of people that I heard you talk about are people that are in abusive situations. I too think about this a lot. I think about Kentucky is high on the list of the number of abused kids. And so I think about kids that are home with abusive parents right now. And so that weighs on me heavy. And I think about people who are in domestic violence situations. You getting out of the house, if you're in an abusive relationship, you getting out of the house and finding safety is as important as keeping people safe from the coronavirus. You have to figure out a way that you can remove yourself safely from the situation and go somewhere that you can be safe. So it would be anything that I would tell somebody in a session for domestic violence. If somebody is hitting you, if they are being emotionally, physically abusive to you, we have to figure out a way to get you out of that house. But the biggest thing when I'm working with someone who has said that they were being abused in a session, the biggest thing is, where can you go to be safe? And so you probably should be thinking about that, whether that's going to a parent's house, whether that's going to a friend's house. Figuring out a way that you can get out of that situation is number one. I understand that we are in the middle of this weird crisis right now, but getting you safe is the number one thing that we can do. And I can get resources for you of numbers that you can call. I think if you are having a domestic violence situation, you can still call the police.
Yeah.
I think that they will. That is something, that and abuse is something that is still going to be handled. But figuring out how to get you safely out of the house and getting a plan for that is very important. But you do not have to stay. Yeah. Just because we are in this weird situation right now, you do not have to stay.
Right. Safety in this case trumps social distancing.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Bridget, I thank you for your time. I mean, I know it's a Monday, and there's lots of things going on in our homes and those kinds of things. And so I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out and sharing with us just some great wisdom and ways that we can thrive in this, and things that we can grow, questions we can ask, ways that we can handle situations, and even in this last one, that curveball question of these are some things that we need to be doing to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and that we're safe and stuff like that. So thank you for joining us today. And I really, really appreciate it. Anything else? Did we miss anything? We cover all the bases.
I think we covered the bases, but if anybody has any questions, they can email you and then get it to me, and then I'll send over a response.
Great. Hey, want to say thanks for tuning in and listening along today. If you've enjoyed this, just do the whole like, subscribe deal, because that will make sure that you get to stay in the loop with more adventure stories as they come up. Now, here's what we're working on for next Tuesday. I've got a couple phone calls and a couple voicemails and some text messages out to some friends of ours that live in the New York City area. One of them is a pastor and church planter in Harlem, and we just want to get some insight in terms of what's going on in a city that is the epicenter of this whole outbreak in the United States, and how is the church being the church in a really, really hard-hit area. And on top of that, Harlem is an extremely ethnically diverse part of New York City. And so what does that look like? What does it look like for the church to be the church in an area where you've got a ton of diversity? And so we're hoping that that's going to work out, and then we'll be able to have that conversation for next week. If not, I promise we'll have some other cool stuff to talk about as well. So hope to see you next Tuesday with some more adventure stories.